physio for 8 months. Well, that there is the view that I'm looking at out of the window, the old course at St Andrews and the sweeping vista that one gets to see from 18, which is the newish bar and restaurant atop the Rusix Hotel, which once again is my home this week for the Alfred Dunhill Links Championships, which is a golf tournament, but it is so much more than that. It's a celebration of the game. It's a celebration of friends, many old, some a little newer, and a celebration of South African wine, because amongst the guests at this event over the years, thanks to the generosity of Johan Rupert, who puts the event together, many South African wines are invited to be part of this week and a showcase to some rather influential guests who take part in the tournament. And so, as we've done over the last few years this week, I am celebrating from Scotland some terrific South African wine. I'll be doing it later on this week with Gareth Robertson, who heads up the marketing team at Antonio Rupert Weiner, and he will be running me through some wines from the Rupert stable. We'll also be looking at some wines from Ruston Freada and some wines from Waterford. But this evening, unsurprisingly, we have a golfer with a fondness for wine, talking about another golfer with a fondness for wine. The golfer in question is Louis Stradham, who's a fantastic golfer who makes a bit of wine in his spare time and is swing coach and putting analyst to one Ernie Els. Louis running the show at Ernie Els Winery in G. I've had an exciting few years. So Louis joins us on the show this evening. Also joining us, another good friend of the show, another good friend of mine, Hein Kuchlenberg from La Motte, which is another of the wines that features prominently during the course of this week. And then we also have one of the celebrity players. It is a glittering cast that take to the fairways over St Andrews, Carnoustie and Kings Barnes this week. And one of the regulars is the man who came to prominence internationally for his role as Hagrid in the Harry Potter movies. Yeah. He's also known to South Africans as one of our all-time great forwards, one of the hard men of South African rugby, Skalk Burger Sr., who now spends most of his time making wine and sending it off to very welcoming corners of the world, Velbeduct and Skalk Burger and Sons. So those are my three guests coming to you from 18 at the Rusix in Scotland, overlooking the 18th fairway and green here at the Old Course at St Andrews. But before we jump into our guests, and equally importantly, some rather good wine, here's a quick look at some latest wine news. Well, this is coming up this Thursday. It's your last chance to get on board Friars Cove out in the middle of nowhere up on the west coast, but fast becoming a sought-after producer of Sauvignon Blanc in particular, but not just. They're doing a couple of other whites and some very nice light, elegant, windswept reds. And this is on Thursday evening, hosted by Pick and Pay, their latest winemakers table. I'll be hosting that from here in Scotland before jumping over to Lisa Godwin, formerly of Mirandale, now out of Friars Cove, and Chef Jonathan. And they'll be taking you through the evening, a combination of that celebrated Sauvignon, some lovely Chenin, and a really nice Grenache Cinsault that speaks to the softness of West Coast elegance. And that will be with some great food as well. You'll learn how to make all the meals. There are the last few tickets available, and you can jump onto web tickets if you'd like to come and join us online. The food and wine will be delivered to you across South Africa, and you'll get my company to kick off with, and then on to chef and winemaker for what promises to be a lovely evening with some really nice and very well-priced wines from up on the West Coast. Now, this is a reminder of some of the wine I've been drinking over the last week. You might have seen this on social media. Two very different wines, obviously, but two wines that you don't see a huge amount of. On the left, I managed to sneak one bottle out of Winemaker of the Year, Duncan Savage. This is his Not Tonight Josephine, his Napoleonic tribute, his dessert wine that strikes that beautiful chord between sweetness and tanginess. It's not cloying, it's not overwhelming. It's certainly plenty of sweetness, but it doesn't last and it tails off delightfully. Not much of it on the market. If you can get hold of it, cherish it and do not share it with anybody else. Not much of the wine on the right either. That is the Lanzerac Tribute Pinotage, the Pioneer Lanzerac, 1959, produced the first commercial bottled Pinotage in South Africa, and they are paying tribute to it with a more recent reincarnation, this from 2015. Pinotage frequently has its detractors. This is one for the good guys. It's a bold wine, but it's not overwhelmingly so. There's nothing clumsy about it. And on a Northern Irish evening, which I had yesterday, it served as a wonderful cap to Heritage Weekend. Now this was flying out of our Tambo on Friday evening, and I'll run through the video in just a moment. But I really like this, a selection of Cabernet Sauvignon from Stellenbosch and giving tourists some guidance on great wine from a great region. This is a selection, so have a look at it here. Next time you're flying out of our Tambo, you want to select some wine to take abroad with you, and the Cabernet Sauvignon stand is a good place to start. So this is really cool. At our Tambo departures, a selection of Stellenbosch Cabernet Sauvignon from some of the big names right across all of Stellenbosch. Got some of these vintages, some 39 Alto, and a Stark Conner, well done Rutger, Michael and the team at Bartley, the rest of the guys, all the way down to Ernie and Eccleshoff. It's a really cool way of celebrating South African Cabernet Sauvignon, and a great way to go shopping before you take off. All right, Ernie Els, of course, on the show this evening, Rustin Freda on Thursday, and then finally, a new range of boutique range from up in the Swartland. This is the Dutoit family, and a fairly blue-collar selection of wines from a part of the world that not that long ago people didn't really know too much about, but now under that Nolfontein label, a great addition. These, I think, are on way to the Dan Really Likes Wine Cellar this week, so I'll taste them as soon as I get back to South Africa, but nice to see another name added to the growing collection of South African producers, which leads us to a South African producer and one of my very good friends in the South African wine industry, who's no stranger to this show. Fred Schalk, welcome.
Yeah, welcome, Dan. As long as you just be polite to everybody here. Yeah.
I think this has become a second home to both of us, really, both in terms of the tournament and the town as a whole. It's a week, I think, the moment it finishes, we start looking ahead to the following year and putting it in the diary.
Yeah, look, it's fantastic. All the people starting to get together, on the practice tee today and so forth. And it's just a wonderful week to think a South African put it all together. And I've been coming from the days that it was still the Dunhill Cup, when the teams of 3 used to play. So it's just, but every time it's just like butterflies in your stomach, and looking at this view, and to think that Chariots of Fire, just over your left shoulder there, that's where it was filmed. The guys running, commemoration of Roger Bannister and the guys. It's just a wonderful place, beautiful old vast here. And can you believe one evening at the championship dinner we had, Kate and what's her husband's name again? William. Also here. So, they went to Varsity, one of the oldest universities in the country. So, beautiful place.
It's also a week that's punctuated by some fine South African wine, and that's what we're going to be celebrating this evening. Before we jump into it, though, is there a memory from your many years here at the Dunhill that sits above the others in terms of fond recollection?
Well, every year I get reminded more by other people about things that have happened here and taken place. You remind a lot of people about how you nearly dumped out of the on the 17th hole out of the 10th there. Yeah, it's once since we've been doing the wine evening, it's been fantastic, because it's just not the wine evening. A lot of our wines are served at every luncheon and every dinner, and I think it's been fantastic. And I'll never forget that Shane Warne and Elizabeth Hurley got engaged here between mine and Johan's wines during the course of the evening. Obviously, it didn't last so long. I don't think that was due to the wine. But we've had wonderful times. We're going to miss Shane this year. I'm playing tomorrow against Piers Morgan with Alan Lamb, and me and Shane and Piers and Lammy always used to play the Tuesday. So I think it's going to be quite special tomorrow, just to lift a glass to Shane.
All right. Well, let's do exactly that. Lift a glass to him and to this wonderful tournament you're our close friend Johan Rupert has put together, and talk about your wine, because it's now it's the big driving part of who you are, what you do. You came to the world's attention as a rugby star, but I'm very much in the wine industry. I know we've had this conversation on the show before, but remind people for who maybe the story's unfamiliar, how this big successful Springbok decided that wine was the life after rugby.
Well, maybe one of my worst decisions that I took in my life, but one of my more enjoyable decisions. Obviously it's a passion. If it's not a passion, I don't think you must be in this industry. But also, what's important is, living close to the soil and the land and everything, and the relationship to rugby and simple basics. There are a few basics in wine, and everybody's different. We've all got different ways that we run. We're all different positions. We play different positions in life. We've got different brands. So to me, it's a family business. My son Tian is very involved in the business, with the winemaking and also with the viticulture. And everybody says, my other son, they believe he's on the farm. What does he do? I said, I don't know. They said, but how do you not know what he's done? I said, he hasn't applied for a job yet. So no, it's something special, and Hein and Louis can attest to it. It's not easy. COVID has not been easy. And, our industry at this point in time, just this past week, my poor son was trying to get stuff bottled, losing 4.5 hours a day. And, and it's difficult. You're not always being able to get bottles and stuff like that. And the whole industry is being hamstrung. But I think we're resourceful. There have been worse things that has happened around the world. And I think we South Africans will get through it.
Well, part of getting through it is spreading the gospel of South African wine and ensuring markets around the world are happily drinking it, which makes this a very important week for South African wine. So we have two other guests joining us from back in South Africa who look, from what I've seen, as though they've got power. Louis Stradham at Ernie Els and Hein Kuchlenberg at Lamar. Gentlemen, welcome. Lovely to have you back on Dan Really Likes Wine. Welcome to a very special week. Lovely to have you with us. Let's kick off with you there, Hein. As somebody who knows this event well, you've been over here before. How important is it for a platform like this to have Lamott and, by extension, South African wine showing to such a cool and influential selection of people here in Scotland this week?
Dan, it's wonderful to be with you and your guest. Yes, I think you must enjoy St. Andrews, home of golf. And it's always a privilege to play there and just to watch it on TV as well. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. South Africa and wine, foreign wine, the foreign market is really important for us. At Lamott, we try to export about 50% of our volume. And it's really important for us to get a platform, international platform, where we can get people to come and visit us from a tourism point. Lamott as a brand is positioned as an international tourism brand. So it's wonderful to be on this platform and show our wines in Scotland. And I know the guest is not only from Scotland or Europe, they come from all over the world. Wonderful platform. So it's a privilege to be part of that.
What about Hein in terms of the kind of wine? We're going to try some of yours, as we will Skulk and Louis in just a moment. But showing wine to people that sits at that very top end. For so long, our South African wines have sat in a low to middle bracket most of the time in terms of price. And we always talk proudly about the great value of South African wine. But as we drink wine that we are this evening, which is very much premium South African wine, do you get the sense that we're starting to impact on the rest of the world as a premium brand, and people are starting to understand that top-end wine from people like yourself, like Skulk, like Louis, can sit alongside top French wine, top Californian wine, top Italian wine, and demand the kind of prices in the past South Africans would never have been brave enough to attach to their wine?
Hello, Dan. Yes, I don't know if you can hear me. The line, we lost the line a bit, but I hope you can hear me. Yes, we talk about South African wine, the quality, and Yes, South Africa is quite unique if you talk about the biodiversity and the potential of making high quality wines in South Africa, and with the terroir options that we do have in South Africa. I think we are a very exciting wine country in the world, where mostly every year you will plant vines on new virgin soil in South Africa, and we as winemakers do have the opportunity to make wonderful wines from those vineyards in the years to come. So yes, from a quality point of view, I think South Africa is now right up there with the top in the world. Perception-wise, we still have to work quite a lot to get the perception that South Africa do have high quality wines, and around the world it is people maybe buy down because of pressure financially. But from a perception point of view, I think we need to work as South Africans to create the perception that South Africa is right up there with the tops.
I remember, Louis, when I was speaking to Ernie about his wine during lockdown, and we were doing assorted shows, and he was talking about his first encounters with wine and making his first wine. And he was saying that he could sell the first vintage because it had Ernie Els on the label, but if the wine wasn't good enough, he wasn't going to be able to sell vintage number 2. Is that a reasonably good reflection of the Ernie Els journey to now, that it caught a lot of attention because it had Ernie's name on the label, but it then started getting even more attention when people like Robert Parker started giving you 95 and 96 points, and you were $100 wine in America, and people accepted that based on quality rather than just because you had a big friendly golfer on the label? I think you're on mute there, Louis. Just losing Louis there for a moment. We'll jump back to him on that point. Scully, you're over here in the UK a lot, selling out your wine, and you've got some wine that I think still speaks to that gregarious market, to borrow a name from your Meerkat range. But you've also got wine like the number 6 that we're going to be drinking in a moment. Is your sense that people in Europe and the UK market are accepting more South African wine at a premium price point and in a top bracket?
Yes, we've got one problem that we've brought onto ourselves, and that in the UK at present, over 60% of the wine being exported to UK comes over in bulk, and it's being sold in the average of about £6 a litre. I mean, at 20, it's 30 pence. It's like 25 pence per bottle. So it's driving the overall RSPs, retail selling prices, down in the UK. And all these bottling plants, and like in Germany, there have been months now that 80% of the wine being sold in Germany has been bulk. So the following point is a lot of the top brands being sold in the UK are not owned by South Africans. They're owned by Matthew Clark and other bottlers and people like that. So we've got to look at ourselves outside of that. And I think that's where Louis and myself and Hein, with these brands are, the number 6 is selling to Sporting Wine Club at £70 a bottle, and it's doing quite well. We forever just short supplying them, but it's and I think the future will be determined about those price brackets that we've got to go through, because the average RSP is under £6 for red and white South African wines, whereas New Zealand wines, the average retail selling price of white wine is close to £8. So the difference that can be, be made in South Africa, and that's where we've just got to go, for quality. And the big thing with a lot being bottled here, we've got the best traceability system in the world, through Savas. But a lot of these wines here, you go to all the big grocers, wine licenses, they're not certified because they're being bottled here. So we've got to jump through, and the 3 very important points on any label is vintage, origin, and cultivar. So they're putting it on the label here, but it's not being certified. They're certifying the bulk in South Africa out to here. So I think that's one of the things. I don't want to be negative about that, but that is driving the price down. So South Africa is becoming a commodity. And the first wine the Australians tried to commoditize wine, with yellow tail, and which was Western Wines, South Corp, and then eventually Foster's, the controlling body. And because they were looking for bulk wine, they said wherever in the world there's cheap wine, they'll buy that in. And we've just got to be careful of that, because we can tell beautiful stories. We've got beautiful stories like Hein reiterated there, virgin soils being planted and everything. We must just get out and tell the stories. We've got to get to the government, get money, and do marketing campaigns and tell the stories. That's what the people want to hear. We're at that stage. And that is going to add the extra 2, 3, 4 pounds on the bulk market to our wines. And I mean, you take something like Rioja, which is one of the phenomenal successes in the UK, where they were actually very low-priced wine, and they spent the Reserva and Gran Reserva, and they upped the prices. And they did a wonderful job. Now everybody here goes to a restaurant and they don't ask for a specific one. They say, "Can I have a Rioja, please?" So we in South Africa have got to do that, Stellenbosch has done a great job with regards to wine of origin Stellenbosch. But, site-specific wines and stuff like that, we've got to tell the stories. And we have got the stories. I honestly believe it. We've got the wine, we've got the stories, we've got the faces behind the wines. So, and that's what we've got to do. And thanks to you, people like you, helping us put that mix together, because that's the subconscious part of brand building. Somebody sits there and he's seen something like this. He's seen Hein, he's seen Louis, the resemblance to the brands and what we stand for, and because we've got good stories. I'm very positive about that.
Well, let's try and go back to that story from Louis. Let's see if we've got some connection back. There was power issues back in South Africa, as we know well. Louis, if you are there with us, my earlier query was around the building up of the story around Ernie Els wines and the transition from this is wine we buy because it's got Ernie's name on to this is wine we're buying because it's really good and people really like it. Is that a fair reflection of where the Ernie Els wine journey has gone?
Yes, Dan, you can hear me now.
Loud and clear.
Perfect. Well done. Good afternoon and evening, everybody. It's great to just say a few words on Ernie and the wine. You're 100% correct, Dan, that when we started off, a lot of people saw it as a celebrity brand, and how serious is the wine. And like I always said, I'm one of the few winemakers that actually have to compete against my own brand from a perception perspective, and make sure people that buy the brand because of the wine, not because of Ernie Els. But we've been making wine now close on 22 years at the property, and I do believe that the first bottle, sometimes someone does buy it, take it off the shelf because of who Ernie is, and the second bottle is only because of the great quality of the wine that we make. But we are so fortunate to have obviously the Stellenbosch terroir, and you spoke a little about Cabernet Sauvignon, and our wines are based around Cabernet Sauvignon and the blends that we make on the property, and that drives the success. We're not trying to be something who we aren't from a wine perspective, and I think that has been the secret to the success by actually enhancing and nurturing our terroir into the wines that we make, and with Ernie obviously giving us a foot in the door. My wife loves to tell me, she says, I got it easy because I sell Ernie Els wines. But I said, no, it's the good wine that I make. But anyway, I think it's a bit of both. Dan?
I'll nudge it on the side of the wine on your behalf there, Louis. What about Ernie Els over the last little while? Because there's been a lot of change. You've redeveloped the whole property. There have been some additions to the ownership structure. It looks like not just a time of change, but also a time of great excitement for Ernie Els.
Yes, we just celebrated our 2 years of being open in this September, and it's been such an amazing journey since Baron von Staff purchased the majority share in the property way back, feels like in 2017, and we've really re-looked at and revamped our primary production facility and the offering from the farm, and it's offering that. And then you've been here once or twice before, especially enjoying the long Sunday lunches on the terrace. But we have a great restaurant now focusing on Cabernet and dry aged red meat, and I think that is what really wine is all about: is enjoying it with friends, enjoying it with good company and relaxing and just enjoying life. And that is what the new property actually offers, is that really enjoyment of wine. So we're very much wine centric at the property. We've everything revolves around the wine that we make, and we want to show wine in different ways. And I think that is what a great culinary restaurant does, is showing wine and how wine changes when you have a little bit of a meal. We last year during the COVID year, we had more than 40,000 visitors to the property, and that's just amazing to say. So a lot of time people say build it and the people will come, but that is what I really saw, and we built it and the people have come. So we've had, like this year, we've had more than 30,000 people to the winery just in a half year. So that's really amazing that people want to get out there, want to enjoy the facility, and not be not sit on Zoom meetings in an office somewhere, but sitting on a terrace at Ernie Els enjoying red wine and the view. Dan?
And they come for that view. They come for the golf. They come for the restaurant, which is lovely. But they also come down to the wine. And you've mentioned it there, Skulk, referring to some of the focus that we've placed on wine and where it comes from, and those real wines of origin. You've dialed down quite a bit in terms of your offering. I remember my first encounters years ago. There was a far broader offering. There was white wine on show. You had quite a broad space that you played in, but you've really decided to focus. This is what we're exceptional at. This is what we want to do, and it's Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Sauvignon inspired wine that really is making up the bulk of the Ernie Els offering.
That's correct, Dan. I think we've just totally narrowed down the offering from the property, and it's everything to do with Cabernet and Cabernet-based blends. Even our rosé is made of Cabernet Sauvignon, which not many people do, and it's an expensive wine to make. But I was actually quite surprised how great the Cabernet only makes a rosé. We do whole bunch pressing. We actually keep the wine for 3 months in oak barrels directly after primary ferment, and get a lovely mouthfeel and softness, and you can actually taste that, like actually the weight and the structure from the Helderberg even within a rosé. So say 100% correct. It's about the focused approach. So if you want to taste some of the best Cabernets in Stellenbosch, Ernie Els is definitely the property to visit. That definitely, Dan.
And of course, we saw those in the clip a little earlier on in the show around the Stellenbosch Cabernet Sauvignon on sale and on display at OR Tambo. And it underscores one of the real strong points of Stellenbosch, which has got a fairly broad offering. What about Franschhoek, Hein? Where do you see Franschhoek's wine identity? Where have you as a valley progressed to in terms of collectively being able to say to the world, we are the Franschhoek Valley, this is what we do?
Yes, Dan, obviously the French Huguenots settled in this valley of Franschhoek. Used to be called Elephant Corner, and they changed it to French Corner. So we obviously plant a lot of French varietals like Shiraz. And Shiraz is the one cultivar that we embrace at La Motte. And we try to make Shiraz from all the cooler climate areas like Elgin, Bot River, and Elam, the most southern point in Africa. So we invested in planting in all of the cooler regions to try and find a very Rhone style wine at La Motte with obviously Shiraz and then Grenache is the other component, and we also have Petit Shiraz. And that's now when you taste the Hanley Arc, you will see it's a Shiraz Grenache Petit Shiraz blend. And for us, because of the climate and because of the soil that we have here in Franschhoek, it's ideal really good for the Shiraz-based wine that we want to make for our Hanley Arc. But in general, Franschhoek is also well known for Chardonnay. There's quite a lot of Chardonnay that is well known here. Chamonix, for instance, is also always one of the top Chardonnays in South Africa. And then Sauvignon Blanc as a white. But if you want a good Cabernet Sauvignon, you have to go to Stellenbosch or Wellington. Those are the two places that you go for Cabernet. South Africa, as I said earlier, is quite unique in the terroir options that we have. And we as winemakers must be clever to really get the best out of the soil that we have. You as a winemaker can come up with the best recipes that you like, but the quality of the wine is dependent on where the grapes are coming from. And we as grape growers need to use the potential that we have in South Africa to really unlock that potential.
You've also got a story to tell in terms of some of the history around La Motte, where Skulk has got a glittering rugby career, and Els and sister Hollywood career, where Louis got this wonderful golfer who's so popular around the world. You've got a really strong link to art. Tell us about the role that Ernie plays both in the La Motte story as a whole, and then how you channel that into guiding it towards your wine sales.
Yeah, obviously, at La Motte, we try to live and show the tourists that visit us the passions of the family. And one of the passions, obviously, from Hanley's side, is the art that we have at La Motte. She was really lucky to get the Pierneef liner cuts, all 128 of them in a collection. And then we got friends with Marita Pierneef, that's Pierneef's daughter in London, and then later bought the Heritage collection of Pierneef paintings from her, and then put up a museum at La Motte. So it's one of a kind of museums that you will have to visit when you come to South Africa. It's one of the unique painters and we have the Heritage collection at La Motte. So yes. Art definitely not only art in the form of music. Hanley is a mezzo soprano, so she was an international singer. And yes, with the art, also the food and wine. We have different restaurants that we have. We are busy renovating La Motte, and by October we will open up a world-class bakery restaurant at La Motte, and then we're in the process of also changing the other restaurant. So a lot of new plans at La Motte, a lot of energy flowing at the moment to get the tourism offering to a very high new standard for 2023.
Which reminds me of something I meant to ask you before, Hein, and that is if you could have a quiet word with Hanley when you get a gap and ask her if on Dan Really Likes Wine, we could possibly have a unique performance of her and Skulk in duet, adding some musical grandeur to the wine show. If you could ask her if that's possible, Hein.
I'll ask her tonight, and I've asked her quite a few times from requests from people, but she made a decision many years ago that she stopped singing, and then she really stopped and put her energy in all the other things that she's busy with. But maybe, just maybe, she will make an exception for Skulk. I'm not sure. I'll have to ask her.
Hey, how special would that be? Duet. You did a duet on the Dan Nichols show. I didn't know you could do one on Dan Really Likes Wine.
Well, this little Saturday night show that we do here, I'm only a dumb luck forward, and I've got to. I play with all these other guys in the band here, which is not always that well known back home. But I'd much rather skip this and maybe very quietly one evening in the restaurant in the back corner, me and Hanley I can just be a backing just little noise. Because I've listened to Hanley and she's phenomenal. I've listened to her a few times and fantastic.
As long as I'm in the audience, I will be happy. You mentioned the Saturday night, and it is an extraordinary collection of people over the years. You've played in the band with Tico Torres from Bon Jovi, with Tom Chaplin, with the great Kelly Slater, who's not just a surfer but a guitarist, Mike Rutherford, Dave Farrell from Linkin Park, Ronan Keating, Bill Murray. It's an extraordinary collection of people.
Huey
Lewis, a great French.
Don Felder from the Eagles.
It's an endless list, and it's part of this wonderful gathering that also features on a regular basis one Theodore Ernest Els. He's sadly not with us this year, but he's been a regular over the years, a good friend to Johan. What were your first thoughts, first of all, when he said, I want to go into wine, and then secondly, when you tried his wine for the first time?
Well, I've got a quite an interesting background with regards to that. When they were busy buying the piece of land from Fred Weber, we were having the Ernie Els Invitational. And so I was asked my opinion about it and everything. And then, as everybody knows, and Louis knows, there was the well-regaled issues with regards to Ristenvrede and John leaving, and they formed Engelbrecht Els. You remember, that was the whole story. And it was just phenomenal because, Louis had made the first lot of wines actually at Ristenvrede. And they were phenomenal. They were great wines. And obviously, they decided they would absolutely top end of the market. And it was fantastic. But it was no, those days, Ernie was a little bit wild, let's say, the Ernie Els Invitational. And 4 o'clock in the morning, drinking these phenomenal wines actually just didn't suit, really. You should be drinking rum and coke or something else. But it was fantastic. Going down to the hotel down at Herald's Bay and then opening up a case of Ernie Els, award-winning wines that Park had just written about it, So that was fantastic, being able to enjoy it with him. But I think that's what wine is, There's no time, there's no place. It's just sometimes the best wines you've drunk has just been spontaneous, and
with the right people.
With the right people, and South Africa, I think that's one of the things we've got to be able to say to the people. We've got that.
Well, we've got some of the Ernie Els 2015. Louis, the story is well established. You sat down with Ernie, you tried a whole lot of different blends. Time and again, he came back to this similar style of Bordeaux blend that set the pathway for how you were going to work together on creating wine and really did reflect who Ernie was, rather than just banging a name on the label and saying that will be it. How from there has the Ernie Els signature in particular evolved as a wine for you?
Dan, yes, the signature was the first wine we made back in 2000, which is a great year to start for a new wine. And as correctly as you said, what we did is we put a few different blends on the table, and that was Ernie's choice. And people have to ask me, so what is Ernie's involvement with making the wine? I said he's the one that chose this one, decided that's the one we're going to make. And I said to Ernie those days, he said to me, he can't actually make the choice. He doesn't know much about wine. So I just said to Ernie, you just tell me what you like, because that's all you actually really need to know about the great glass of wine in front of you is what you enjoy in a glass of wine. And on that day, the signature was born, and that has evolved over the last 22 years. I'm currently selling the 2016. I know you got the 2015 with you today, and it stays to the core of our business. That 60% of that blend is Cabernet Sauvignon, and that gives me the body and the structure and the depth for the wine. 25% is Merlot. That gives you a little bit of softness and just knits the different components together. And then 5% each of Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, and Malbec. So Cabernet Franc is normally for a little bit of austerity, a little bit of mineraliness. And the Petit Verdot and the Malbec is much more I would call them always the marketing department of the blend. They're much more showy and rich and powerful. But that's why they're only 5%. You can only take them in little snippets. Otherwise, they will totally dominate the blend. So it is a Medoc style red blend, Cabernet based, which actually gives the wine a great aging potential. And I think that is the hallmark of really great wines, is the ability of the wine to age. And so the 2015 got a 5-star in the platter for 2022. And for me, it was really heartwarming to see that we could compete with because there's so many wineries that are making young wines and sending them to platter, and they're getting 5 stars, and we can able to compete with a 2015-year-old vintage against all the young guns. And this the big granddaddy can still get a 5-star rating in between all those more showy wines, which when the wines are much younger, obviously much more primary fruit. So it's nice to see that we get the recognition for us aging the wine, because that is what our plan is, to have the wine minimum 5 years in our cellar maturing before it goes to the marketplace. So that was really heartwarming to see. Dan.
Tell me quickly a little bit more about 2015 from your perspective, because it's a vintage that's gone through an interesting journey, and that initially this massive rock star year of a wine, reds from Stellenbosch have never been better. It's just extraordinary. And I think with time, with a lot of estates, it's almost the 17 that quietly has caught up and in some cases overtaken and not overshadowed 15, but perhaps just taken pole position. How do you see 15 both as a year now and going forward? How much longer a wine like this we can keep and open in years to come?
Yeah, then the 2015 vintage, because of the great, obviously, presence that wine's got, and I think the winemaker really needs to understand the vintage. And I think if you used your oak really well and gave it that little bit more width with the oak, you and actually complementing that lovely dark fruit that we got, we use actually a little bit of a lighter toasting, so that we don't overpower the that dark, because otherwise those fruit can be very rich and a lot of like blueberry flavor. So we would a little bit of red fruit in with our oak that's a little bit more lightly toasted. And I think that's what we did well with the 17. We didn't try and compete against the vintage. And 2015 is still going to last for many years. The 17, as you said, is a little bit more. It lies like a little bit at a lower extraction level than the 15, and so that's why the 17s are actually showing really smart now. They it's 5 years after vintage, and the wines are just really peaking really nicely now. So I think it's what you see in a glass of wine, and I love both vintages for what they are, and I think they will both be successful in their own right from a vintage perspective.
Before we jump on to the wine of La Motte, a quick thought there on that 2015 signature, Scott?
I think I said it previously to Louis. There are many wines in South Africa which I believe, and I was just during the week being in London and around outskirts of London, I met up with 3 masters of wine, which are a bit worried about where South Africa is going, maybe with over robust open wines. And what Louis was saying, the beautiful balance and finesse. The top wines of the world have got finesse, and they keep it over a longer period of time. And all these wines have got that beautiful finesse. Our good wines can do that. I think there was a period where we tried to make over-bold wines, over-wooded, over-extracted. But listening to Louis, you can see it's all about balance. And the great wines of the world, and these wines all stand up to the great wines of the world. It's very well balanced. Any blend goes through phases, and that's the unique thing of a blend. The interaction, and I mean, there's nobody better than a winemaker, because he knows making the individual components and putting them together, and with time how they interact. And it's wonderful, what happens in a bottle. And sometimes I like going around the world and drinking wines that I haven't got, that we're not selling now, and then you find out nuances of the wine, and we've got it. It's there. It's beautiful.
Well, let's head over to our winery in Franschhoek and back to Hein at La Motte. Tell me about the Hunley R, because just as the Ernie Els signature was very carefully crafted to reflect the wine that Ernie likes himself and that speaks to his character and to his palate, is the Hunley R wine that is reflective of both the character and the personal wine choices of the singing sensation after whom it was named?
Yeah, Dan, I really think so. This the Hunley R we started in 2003, first vintage, and as I said, we really explore vineyards more to the southern side in Africa, towards Elim. And the 2015 was a blend of Shiraz of 58%, Grenache 32%, and Petit Shiraz of 10%. And as Louis explained, 2015 was a really good vintage with really good conditions making for the potential in making good quality wine. And the Shiraz vineyards in Elim grown in a layer of coffee clip soil, and this obviously with a cool climate produce wines with intense flavor and a minerality on the palate. The Bottle River Shiraz vineyards grow in more shallow, dense shell and produce wines with high tannin and more dark color. The Franschhoek vineyards grow in deep sandy soils and produce elegant wines with more creamy texture And because of the grapes originated from different and diverse terroirs, I think the wine do have the depth and complexity. And we keep the wine in 300-liter barrels for 40 months. And then we only do about 3,800 bottles per year of this wonderful wine named after my wife, Hannelie.
I think proudly so. I think it's a great tribute to Hanley in this wine. It also, not just in this one, if I look also at, say, your Syrah Viognier, you've got a real handle at La Motte, I think, Hein, of not just playing around with Syrah, doing some great stuff with it, but also taking Syrah into a space which I think more South African wine producers are now doing. We've historically had a lot of the more Shiraz style. It's big and it's bold. It's kind of skulk-like. It's got plenty of presence, whereas there are a lot more Syrahs now we're seeing made with more elegance, made with a little more subtlety. And I think what you guys have been doing with the Hanley are with something like the Viognier, the Pianif that you make, is taking Syrah into that space and doing it successfully for some time now.
Yeah, I think we made the decision many years ago, and that was like 2003. We started this whole process of re-establishing La Motte and positioning La Motte as an international grower of Syrah. And we visited the Rhone Valley and spent quite a couple of years with winemakers in the Rhone Valley, making wine with him. And came back and decided that the La Motte Syrah Viognier, for instance, the alcohol will always be between 13 and 14 or below 14. We are not making big masculine wines. This is a feminine brand, so we need to go for lower alcohol, and the most of the alcohol must be 13.5. And we are looking for balance, much more balance, and much more the French style of drier tannins, but really wines that you can mature for many years. So for us, this is the La Motte style, and I think the Viognier is from Franschhoek, and the Syrah, as I talked earlier, it's from all the other exciting areas that we can make cooler climate, get the cooler climate vignettes from.
Schalk, before we try your number 6, a quick word on not just the La Motte wines, but the space we find ourselves in South Africa, that Shiraz versus Syrah.
Yeah, I think, the big thing is its style. Shiraz sometimes has been, misconstrued out of the Australian, Californian, highly extracted, highly wooded. And we have got, vineyards that can give the Syrah. Like Hein was saying, the various blocks that he uses, and the various types of unique flavorings that you will get out of those various soils, that typifies the Syrah. Syrah is like that, but you need good grapes of Syrah to make a good Syrah that can last. Sometimes Shiraz that's too over extracted and too much wood can go over the cliff, and it separates. Where these are beautiful wines, and after so many years still standing up, and many times what has happened also, many of the masters of wine have said we can't make Syrah that can last. But we can,
and we're drinking some of it now.
Yeah, and it's beautiful.
All right, let's go on to this number 6. It, of course, speaks to another Skalkberger. I think you're the 83rd and your son 84th and your grandson 85th consecutive Skalkberger in this long line thereof. It's a jersey that brought smiles to many faces on South African rugby fans, not so much All Black, Wallaby, England, French fans, etc. Now it's a number 6 on the label, brings much joy to wine drinkers, just as the Ernie Els signature reflects Ernie, the Hanley R reflects Hanley. Does the number 6 reflect Schalk Jr., your superstar rugby son, and if so, why?
Well, the number 6 came about that both me and both my sons played provincial rugby in the number 6 jersey. So when we were trying to do something, I just didn't want to use the word Schalk at that stage. We came up with the whole idea of, let's call it number 6. Obviously, Jack Daniels opposed my registrations around the world, but we proved that number 7 is very different than number 6. And our first batch that we made was 6 cultivars, and to this day still 66 cultivars, and it's a multiple of 6 barrels, or 6, 12 barrels, 18 barrels, so we've gone on. And it's Syrah based. We wanted to do a Rhone style wine, and you know, one of the best kept secrets in South Africa was when Mark Kent was buying my Syrah, with the one block of Syrah on my farm. Boekenhout's Kloof Syrah all came from my farm, but I wasn't allowed to let anybody know that it was coming from my farm. Then in 2007, after 7 years of him buying the grapes, he became winemaker of the year in South Africa with the Boekenhout's Kloof Syrah. So he phoned me and he said, "What are we going to do now?" So I said, "Maybe we should come clean." So, but I was under contract that I wasn't allowed to let anybody know it was Wellington grapes. So when he made his acceptance speech of the award, he said, "Well, I've got a little secret to break. The grapes actually come from Wellington." So we use the same, and there's a bit of Viognier in here, and it's very similar, you know, if you think the Lamotte there as well. We did a few things differently. There's a little bit of Cinsault in there. We did very much Petit Syrah, and we've got Pinot Noir in there, and also a bit of Malbec, a little bit of a difference, you know. We wanted to do our own thing. But the number 6 basically is, I've got very European palate, you know. I was lucky through the years to be able to drink beautiful wines from Europe. So very refined, you know, many people look at me and they say it must be a blockbuster, stuff like that. And the way Skalk played, they think it must be a fairy flanker type of something that jumps out of the bottle. But when we sit down and we drink as a family wine, you know, you don't want the wine to dominate the food and vice versa. And we're integrated people. You know, both my sons are good musicians, and my daughter's married to a musician. And there's a lot of music coming through this whole line. And you know, when you're a bit into music, you want things to blend and be fine and refined, you know. And I think that's what it's about.
For wine celebrating 3 large and rather dangerous rugby players, it is surprisingly delicate and elegant, and it is our penultimate wine, because before we wrap up, Hein, I'm going to nip back to you and spring a little surprise on you, because I just dug up a bottle of it, and it doesn't sit directly under the Lamotte brand, but it is a wine you have both an interest in and I suspect a rather close knowledge of and understanding of. This is the Baron Edmund. We have the 2014, just across the road from you, the Rupert and Rothschild collaboration, which you as a family are very much involved with. Give us a quick synopsis of this collaboration and this wine, and the remarkable success that it's enjoyed over the years.
Yeah, it's one of the amazing brands in South Africa. I would say one of the top 3 most successful brands from South Africa. And it was started many years ago with Antoni, with a joint venture with Edmond Rothschild. And they really started an amazing process with Skalk Willem Jumer as the winemaker back then, to identify also really good grapes and to make some of the top South African Bordeaux wines, obviously left bank and right bank. So for the process that they followed of identifying the grapes, and we all know as winemakers, the best Cabernet and the best Merlot that you can find, you will find around Stellenbosch, and you need to really focus on where the really good grapes are coming from. And I think Skalk did a wonderful job with the viticultures that helped him to position the grapes and the brand alongside each other, and then obviously built a wonderful winery many years ago, and they extended the winery about 10 years or 8 years ago. And now JC Becker is a new winemaker there, and they're just taking the brand to further heights. And it's really one of the top South African Bordeaux wines. I would say position at the high price end and the even higher quality end that you can find.
Skalk, it is a wine when you have a sip of it, you probably in a blind taste, it is lovely, but gee, it's a bit young. I'd like to give it a bit more time, and yet it's already 8 years old, which speaks to a wine that's made very much for go the long run, and in 10, 15, 20 years' time, be pulling it out to give it a go.
Yeah, I think the beautiful thing about this one, and you've got a compliment, like I said, Scott Willem, in that he did buy a lot of pockets of. He had a wonderful way, I think, of determining eventually where he wanted to be. But the integration of tannins and acidity relative to the fruit, the wine of this age exhibiting that beauty. And I think that the longer we let it stand open, the better it's going to become. So this is a remarkable wine. This is a standout wine, and it's showing beautifully. But like you say, it's actually showing quite young. It's like a young prop forward. In 10 years' time, will be a good prop forward. So no, I think it's. I'm so privileged. I love drinking beautiful wines and being able to chat to the makers of the wine and stuff like that, because we've got the stories to tell.
We do indeed. Last word quickly from you, Louis. The Ernie Els journey. It's been really exciting, as we've said, over the last few years. What can we expect from you and your team over the next few years?
Thanks, Dan. Yes, I think from us is about very much understanding the Cabernet that we're making on the farm. We've planted now all 11 clones of Cabernet on the farm, and it's actually showcasing ourselves within our own terroir of what we're capable of. So it's fine-tuning what we've been doing, and I think every year it's a new challenge, which is great about wine. I wish if it was a recipe, anybody would do it. And I think that is that finding yourself. I've been making with this wine now for 22 years, and I still feel I've still got so much to give and so much to learn from that perspective. So I think from there we've got the new terracotta cellar, we've got the new obviously cement concrete fermenters that we are using now, the Nicovellos that we imported from Italy. And I think that's going to give us a whole new dimension on the Ernie Els style. But still creeping true to our identity. Dan.
And from you, Hein, you mentioned the bakery, which has both me and Scott very excited. When does that open? When does that kick off?
Now, Dan, we will open the bakery restaurant 1st of December this year. And that will be a very exciting project that we've started with Marcus from Ile de Pin in Knysna. To really look at ancient grain to flour to bread and make bread healthy again. So that's a very exciting process that we are working with now, and I'm really excited about that. Also opening on the first week in December will be our fine dining small restaurant with Jan Hendrik van der Westhuizen at the Vierpos just opposite Lamott, only for 16 people. And Jan did a television show that will be it from the 16th of October for 10 episodes. And he's a night out with some of the famous South Africans. And then they talk about the music like Kuni and Brumalda and many others. And then Jan is making food with them. So, South Africa is a wonderful country, not only from a wine point of view, but from a tourism point of view, and all the experiences that tourists can get when they visit us. And after COVID, we just hope we can go back to the potential of tourism.
Expect to see Sculler and I in the queue for that bakery and that restaurant. Before that happens, you've got a golf tournament to win. How confident are you feeling this week?
Well, I'm a little bit injured, and Rooster, the physio, injured me even further today. But thankfully for cataphlams and stuff like that. And the big thing here is, it's just phenomenal being inside the ropes here. And, my son Tian has twice, been my caddy here. And it's just fantastic. So, being able to play St Andrews, Carnoustie, and Kings Barnes, and if you're one of the top 25, and I've made it 6 times with the cut, which is quite hard because you've got to make it through the championship dinner to tee off the following day. And yes, let's hope it goes well, but it is pressure. Kevin Peterson has teed off it the first 8 times. and he's not once been in bounds.
This is up.
7 times he pushed it out right, and the 8th time he hooked it out of bounds in the Rusaks where we're sitting here. So it is not easy, but it's just so fantastic. It's nice to have everybody.
It is a very, very special week. It's a week that includes more wine on Thursday, and I'll be joined by Jean Engelbrecht from Rust and Freda, along with Mark LaRue from Waterford and the great Gareth Robertson from the Anthony Rupert wine team. And they will be my guests on Thursday as we continue our week at the Alfred Dunhill. For now, I've got dinner to look forward to and finishing off some terrific South African wine from Ernie Els from Lamott and from Skulkberger and Sons, the team at Velbeduct, which leads me simply to say both Hein and Louis, guys, thank you so much for joining me on the show. You've been great friends and supporters for many years, and it's lovely to be trying some of your wine and to be doing so in the presence of Hagrid from Harry Potter here as well, who's always special. Guys, best of luck, and
bye-bye, Louis.
Louis, we'll see you down at the States soon, and Hein, we'll see you for dinner down at Lamott as well.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Thanks, bye.
No. And Scarlett, best of luck this week. Good luck with the golf. We'll see you on Saturday night on stage with that guitar in hand, looking like a banjo, and do the great job you all do this week of celebrating South African wine. It's an important one, and we're very grateful.
Looking after it. Thanks.
So there we go. My very special in-house guest, the great Skulkberger Senior, together with Louis Straden from Ernie Els Wines and Hein Kuchlenberg from Lamott, wrapping us up. Remember, on Thursday, it's Rust and Freda, Anthony Rupert Vayner and Waterford. And we'll also, during the course of this week, be updating you on the other wine we find over the course of the adventures at St Andrews. See you back on Thursday. Have a great evening from Scotland. Goodbye.
Cheerio.
To join the Pick and Pay Wine Club, simply SMS your smart shopper number to 36775. It's absolutely free, and you'll get for yourself 3 times the smart shopper points on every bottle of wine bought. You'll also get a 20% discount on 10 different wines each month, a 25% discount on a case of wine, and a Magnum, some terrific competitions and invitations to awesome events.